is the 99th episode of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Fox News. Rah, rah, war with Iran, a dance with defamation, and another migrant invasion.
I don't want a war with Iran. I'll be very clear about that in a minute. But why do we not target Iranian refineries and let them know clearly that there'll be consequences? I don't want a war with Iran. However, if they're going to attack American troops, it's got to be more than taking out 2 empty warehouses. That wasn't effective. And if they would have taken out their refineries, which again, I don't want a war with Iran, but I am not advocating a war with Iran. But there's got to be some certain rules in life that evil nations need to abide by.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Sean Hannity, probably the biggest hawk on Fox News that I know of. I don't watch every show. I watch the most popular shows on Fox News. And he, out of all the hosts that I cover, definitely seems the most excited about blowing things up and killing people than anybody else on the network. The second I would say would be Senator Lindsey Graham, who is maniacal about his need to go to war with just about any country on any given day. You could give Lindsey Graham armaments, and I think he would just throw them. He would go to Iraq, stand on the border, and just throw them at Iran. Just needlessly, like, here's a gun, ha ha! Lindsey Graham, little nutty. And then I would put Brian Kilmeade probably number 3, because as I've joked about on the podcast before, Brian Kilmeade is like, if he should do a segment, he should do his own show just called "Let's Go to War with Brian Kilmeade," because when he talks about it, he's just like, why can't we just get in there with like a plane, start shooting? We could just go to Moscow, kill Putin, come fly back out. Nobody would know. We got good planes. Of course, he didn't actually say that, but it's sort of implied with Brian Kilmeade. So last week was a very slow news week. They were like kind of repeating stuff. It was very dull, and it was just battering home the border crisis. Just finding ways to wedge the border crisis into everything. Very boring. And because they've been pushing that forever. That's just evergreen. So last week, Fox News tried to terrify its viewers about what it repeatedly called an invasion of migrants at the U.S. southern border. More than one Fox News personality, almost defamed writer E. Jean Carroll, and several Fox hosts seemed ready to declare war with Iran as the U.S. military engaged in strikes on Iranian militia targets. On Friday, The Five and Special Report with Bret Baier broadcast without commercial breaks as both shows threw most of their focus to the military strikes in the Middle East. And of course, these were retaliation for 3 soldiers who were killed by a drone in Jordan. While Fox hosts tore down President Biden's strategy with Israel and Iran, they praised former President Donald J. Trump as if he was some kind of military Svengali, which of course he was not. Meanwhile, the network completely ignored the war in Ukraine while selectively reporting on the conflict in Gaza. While the PBS NewsHour dedicated 5% of its coverage to the Israel-Hamas war, Fox News only spent 1% of its airtime on the conflict. The only story Fox covered about the Israel-Hamas war was an allegation that 12 employees of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees participated or aided the October 7th attack in Israel. So that's very telling. That's the only story that Fox News reported on. There were plenty of other stories about the war that they could have talked about, and we'll go through them later in the podcast because PBS definitely covered it. But that's the only one that Fox covered on. And I almost didn't call it Israel-Hamas war because I was calling it like UN. And then I went back and was like, no, that would put that under there. So it was about 10 minutes total for the whole week, 20 hours, not much. So the shows I covered, Fox and Friends, I picked up extra hours on Tuesday because they were teasing a story that I wanted to see. I was let down by. Thank you so much, Fox and Friends. I also watched The Five, The Ingraham Angle. And then on Friday, I watched everything. So I started with The Five, Bret Baier, Jesse Watters Primetime, Ingraham Angle, and Hannity. So this first big clip we're going to get to is the U.S. military launched strikes in the Middle East, and The Five kept talking about Trump. All told, the missile strikes hit 85 targets in 7 locations, including command and control headquarters, intelligence centers, rockets and missiles, drone and ammunition storage sites, and other facilities that were connected to the militias or the IRGCs. Fox News producers decided to dedicate an entire hour of commercial-free coverage on the 5 to the attacks. There was plenty to talk about as the network invited Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, retired U.S. Army, and Dan Hoffman, former CIA Chief of Station, to discuss the situation. Even though former President Donald J. Trump had absolutely nothing to do with the story, more than one Fox News personality found a way to make it about him.
When Donald Trump was president, and I don't want to make this political.
Kellogg brought up the instance with Donald Trump making a threat to the Taliban and then striking Soleimani and that backing off of power. What I would offer up is this. Donald Trump is an exception to the rule. Donald Trump is one of the reasons he was so hated by both the machine that exists within Washington, D.C. that is now gearing up for yet another war. Whether or not it was left or right, Republican or Democrat, there was enmity towards Donald Trump. And I think
when Trump came in, he gave the generals full authority, go in there and get rid of it. He got rid of them.
But to Will's point, and
I don't know that President Trump ever had those concerns, and I felt much better about it back then.
I'll say, just for the record, that I think this is the philosophical underpinning of what Donald Trump presented to America, that every single calculation, most especially war, should be filtered through the prism of America first.
So the voices that you heard there were Judge Jeanine Pirro, Will Cain, and the person who called in was Johnny Jones. He is normally more on the weekends. They use him on Fox and Friends weekends sometimes, and he does Fox Nation specials, and he'll sub for people. He is a veteran of the Afghanistan war, and he lost both of his legs in combat. I totally see why he would call in to talk about this situation, but it was odd that they kept bringing up Trump, and they did so in Bret Baier's show as well, a special report with Bret Baier. They kept talking about Trump. And I'm like, why are we talking about Trump? He actually has nothing to do with this. And I'd also say that they kept bringing up Trump's decision to assassinate Soleimani, who was an officer in the Iranian military. And it was seen as incredibly controversial when Trump did this. It happened in January of 2020. And it was like just a strike where they blew up a car with no warning, and it was seen as sort of like Trump's way to sort of distract from the fact that he was being impeached. And it's funny because we all kind of forgot about this because this was January 2020. So what happened in 2020? Oh, I don't know. COVID-19 changed everything all over the world. So I know this because my birthday falls the day after. I'm revealing a little bit here. COVID-19 was declared a international pandemic. And I went out with a friend and he was like, happy birthday. And I'm like, really? Is it? Are we all going to die? Anyway, so January 2020, this, targeted strike on this officer who's high ranking in the Iranian Guard. And he tried to say, oh, no. His justification for it was that it was an imminent threat. Like he was going to kill American soldiers the next day. There's never real proof for that. And it was kind of a huge scandal. And at the time, it was seen as a completely reckless, insane thing to do that could have started World War III by some. I was going through some archives, watching clips and reading about this because I didn't really completely understand it because it's like some other things happened in 2020 other than COVID was kind of my brain. But so they acted like this was this amazing, amazing thing. And I'm like, I don't think it was. And his track record in the Middle East was not great. It was kind of all over the place. Couldn't really, because I don't think Trump really understands what's going on over there. And as far as Israel's concerned, give me a break. So just briefly, before we move on to the next clip, Trump, when he was president, his ambassador to Israel, who was just a random lawyer that he'd worked with on a couple bankruptcy cases, he puts him in as ambassador. The man had no diplomatic experience. And the guy's like, let's annex the West Bank for Israel. Like, he seriously said that out loud in public. And then Trump was all for moving the embassy to Jerusalem, moving the capital to Jerusalem for no reason, really, other than to enrage a bunch of Palestinians, cut off funding to the Palestinians, and was just rah, Bibi Netanyahu. Like, Bibi Netanyahu could do no wrong. as far as Trump was concerned. So anybody who thinks he would be better for Palestinians, I don't know what to tell you. And he also did the Muslim ban, and now he said he wants to deport people who protest for Palestine. I don't think he can actually do that, but just, oh my goodness. I don't think he's going to be better. I really don't think he's going to be better for the situation. It's a terrible situation, but that man, I just don't see anything getting better. So anyway, moving on to the next clip. This was Greg Gutfeld's reaction to this whole segment. So this is very strange. He had a few of these. I picked my favorite.
And why is it that we only have consequences for actions not in the United States? Like you said, if you harm Americans, there will be payback. Well, there are Americans being harmed in the United States every damn day. We don't do shit about the border. We don't do anything about crime. When will we send a message to the illegal immigrants or the fentanyl suppliers or the smash and grabbers? Or hell, why not send a message to the people who assault cops? I'm not saying bombing. I'm saying actually creating disincentives, actually punishing people who deserve punishment in the United States and protecting millions of Americans here. I don't want our troops getting bombed over there. I prefer that they be home here. So you put the sitting ducks out there, then we got to go send some virtue signaling message to show that we're doing something and that we know is not doing anything. And then we got to sit here and act like armchair experts talking about this crap for 17 minutes.
That was basically Greg Gutfeld for the entire hour. Every time he got a chance to speak, he just whined that they were covering this at all. Well, sorry, you don't like the story or you don't agree with U.S. policy of the fact that we have military bases all over the world, which we do. And you don't like that, okay, but that's not going to change the fact that 3 soldiers were killed and that the United States military is responding. It's just not. You can whine all you want, but it's not going to change the fact that this is actually happening. So deal with it, you child. Second, the reason why I used that clip, because he gave me like at least 3 pretty good examples of him just whining about everything else, was he said virtue signaling. Now, let me just explain. The United States sent our most advanced bombers, which this blew my mind, which can fly all the way from the United States, refuel midair, all the way to the Middle East, and then just bomb the hell out of everything. And apparently these bombers, like what they were dropping, incredibly powerful stuff. We did warn Iran that this was happening. They did clear the area. We did everything we could to reduce civilian deaths, which I think is wise considering what's going on in the Middle East right now. And we don't want to escalate. So, of course, everybody on the 5 kept, ripping on Biden for saying that and then saying, oh, we don't want a war. But wasn't that great when Trump blew up Soleimani with no warning? And I'm just sitting here going, these people are terrifying. Okay, so this sums up Greg Gutfeld perfectly in so many ways of what this man is all about. Not a fan, really. Not a fan. But this was him whining about the fact that his show, his precious show, Gutfeld, ! Might get bumped for coverage about this, military strike.
And we imagine Fox and Friends weekend is going to be hot.
I guess I know what we'll be talking about
Kane,
for 4 hours.
There you go. It's going to be must-watch television.
They better not bump my show.
Greg,
Greg Gutfeld, a story in courage, right there. Right there. So moving on to the main story that Fox tried to push until Friday happened, and that is the border, we're being invaded, help, run for your lives, basically. Variations on a theme. My favorite is that they keep showing clips of people outsmarting the wall. And they did it again today. I haven't pulled any clips from it yet for Twitter, but I did watch Fox and Friends this morning. And they showed the same clip they were showing last week of people just walking around the wall. There's gaps in the wall. And there's just, people just walking around it. And they're like, we need more wall. And I'm like, hi, I'm going to be a jerk here. But if you show images of people easily, without any effort, just working with their way through this multi-billion-dollar piece of stuff that you put down on the southern border, I don't think putting more of that stuff is going to stop people from coming in. I'm just saying. So far, they've shown people scale the wall. They've shown people cut gaps through the wall and walk right through them. They've shown people just like walk around the wall. I don't think we need more wall. I'm just saying, I don't think that's the key here. I don't, anyway, and maybe if you're going to make the argument that the wall is incredibly helpful as a tool, don't show people just walking right over it. Just, I'm giving you some notes here. Anyway, so moving on, this is Judge Jeanine. Now, this is a story about some young migrant men who got into a scuffle with police. And it looked like a very brief fight, but it was still a fight, and they're hitting a police officer, which is not going to be taken well in New York City. It's not going to be taken well in most parts of the country. And then what happened is they arrested some of the men, but they were trying to figure out who exactly did what, and they're still looking for other people. And so because of that, they let these men out on bond. And then famously, there's a picture of them walking out of the precinct, and they're flipping the bird. And of course, Fox has been showing that on a loop. They showed it this morning. They showed it last week, multiple times, multiple shows, and they showed it this morning. It's like they can't stop showing this clip. And they're like, oh my God, we're losing our minds. So this is Judge Jeanine Pirro talking about the incident.
And let me say one more thing about this. These, I don't even want to call them people because they're not people. These people come here and they say they want asylum, and we suckers believe it. They don't respect authority. They take authority down. One of the other ones we didn't know about yesterday was charged with resisting arrest. He pushed a cop last time a cop arrested him, in addition to their beating down the arrest. So I'm sick and tired of hearing this nonsense. They traveled 3,000 miles through the Darien Gap. It's one of the most dangerous places in the world because they want to be part of the American dream. Baloney. They don't want to be part of the American dream. They don't want to swear allegiance. They don't show up for their asylum hearing. And 85% of them who do don't get asylum.
Richard, why won't Democrats?
If I were going to teach a class on Propaganda 101, that would be a clip that I would play. It's nice and short, emotion all the way to 11. She's cranked up that amp all the way to 11. She's full on, just strident, screaming as she's wont to do. And then she flat out says these people are not people. So immediately dehumanizing them. And then she takes the actions of what was 4 young men. There's more involved in the scuffle, but 4 that were arrested. The 2 that were flipping the bird. There are 2 young men that flipped the bird. They looked incredibly young. And anybody who works in criminal justice will tell you the demographic that commits pretty much most of the crime in any culture are young men, teenagers and young men. It starts from about age 14 to 27 is sort of the peak age for crime. Something about young men, impulsivity. They don't know how to stop themselves. They have testosterone causes all kinds of aggression. They don't really understand that link. You can have really high levels of testosterone and not be aggressive. You can have low levels of testosterone and be aggressive. They don't quite get it, but they know that it plays a role of some sort. So yes, to take those 4 young men and then to say these 4 young men represent every single undocumented immigrant in this country is crazy. She doesn't know anything about those 4 young men. She doesn't know anything about their backstory or why they're here, or what happened, and whatever. But that's just classic propaganda. And that's basically what most of the week was until Friday happened, until the military strike happened. It was just variations of a theme on the border crisis, and I was just losing it because it gets so... It's rough to hear that over and over and over and over and over again. So next up, Richard Fowler. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of him lately because Jessica Tarloff is pregnant and will go on maternity leave eventually. She's about 6 months pregnant right now. So Richard Fowler is a black gay man who does a pretty good... He doesn't have nearly the hours under his belt that Jessica has in that chair. Harold Ford Jr. is a moderate. He's a very nice man. He comes across as incredibly pleasant, but he doesn't really fight with his coworkers. He doesn't push back, and he often agrees with them. So when he's on the show, I'm just like, I'm falling asleep. Again, seems like a nice person, but he's not Tarloff. Fowler's a little bit closer to Tarloff, but he's new, so he doesn't push as many buttons. He's a little unsure of himself yet. I like him. We'll see how he does. Tarloff is just, she's got armor, because she's been doing this a while. She's like amazing. I sit back and I'm like, how do you take it when they just yell over her and condescend to her and laugh at her and mock her, and she just holds it? Just like, whoa, man. So she's amazing. So this was during a discussion about shoplifting. And they were making, they were talking about, this is like a new thing that they've been talking a lot about, which is organized retail theft. And I'll tell you, it's not new. Anybody who's worked in New York retail would tell you that this is not new. This has gone on for years, where groups will come into a store. What they used to do, I briefly worked at a high-end retail store for children. I've had so many weird jobs. And it was like on Park Avenue, Madison Avenue, I don't remember, but very, 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 very posh. And everybody had a lot of money and the clothes were all massively overpriced. And what I was told to look for is that groups would come in, overwhelm the store, like confuse everybody, and they just take whatever they could and just run out. And they were like, be really careful. Any group that comes into the store, get ready to call the cops. So I was like, okay. So again, this is not new, but they were talking about like retail organized theft, and it got on the topic of like why people steal. And this was Richard Fowler's input.
For making the decision that they're making?
Look, I've said all along on this particular issue, I think we have to, even when you think about cashless bail, which is one of the issues that get us to people committing the thefts that you see happening at this Walgreens, I think you have to make a distinction between crimes of desperation and people just doing stupid things. If a mom walks into a Walgreens and steals baby formula, the response is not to arrest her.
I don't
the
think we're
response is to give her
talking about
baby
Jean
formula.
Valjean.
That is an argument that's so old.
Yeah.
No, but it's an argument that's still true. It could be old, but it doesn't take away
in these
the truth.
situations, it's not true.
I don't know a cop who would
It's
make
not
an
true.
arrest in that case.
No, but there was a time,
But
Judge
that's
Namath,
the
people
thing,
were getting arrested for stealing baby
AOC
formula.
was laughed at about 2 years ago for saying that.
Because somebody was stealing bread.
Yeah, that's
We heard
stealing
about
bread
that.
line.
Les
Come on,
Miserables.
Richard.
All right.
I'm telling the truth,
and I do just
man.
want to
So, of course, nobody on the five. Okay, could you get more like white privilege than that? Wow. And like, none of you have ever been poor. None of you. No, maybe Richard Fowler, but none of the other people on this panel have ever been poor, because you have no concept of what people have to do when they're poor. You have no concept of how desperate people get. So that was just, woo. And that blew up on Twitter. I had a feeling that would do well, and it was hugely viral for me. I just want to say that none of them offered any proof to their assertion that Richard Fowler was just talking crazy when he mentioned that people might steal food because they were poor. So it boils down to common sense. If you're going to steal something for money that you can go buy drugs with, or, pay for something else with, if that's your job, like you just steal in order to make money, in order to, buy whatever you need to buy, you're not going to steal food, because you can't resell food, right? You can't, like, if you go into a store, and I use the example of like you buy a $3 box of crackers, right? I like those crackers, which would be difficult to steal because they're big. But anything that you steal in a store, food-wise, you can't go outside of the store and then try to sell it. No one's going to buy it from you. Like, maybe if it's completely packaged, but even then, people are going to be like, why is that guy selling Cheetos? Or certainly like meat. No one's going to buy meat from you. Like meat's expensive, but even if you got out of the store with it, that would be difficult to sell. They might buy, like I've seen people steal like a bunch of laundry detergent, something that's not edible, you might be able to sell, but you're not going to be able to resell food unless you're like ripping off an entire warehouse of something that's shelf stable that you then have some type of mechanism to sell to the general public. For the most part, it's just going to be too hard. People are going to be too sketch. They're going to be like, what are you doing selling food? That's weird. Maybe candy, maybe if it's prepackaged, but it's difficult. So if you're going to steal something, you buy headphones, sneakers. You could probably sell those on the street in New York. If you're savvy enough, you could definitely sell them on then eBay. But I looked up to some reporting about this, and I found an article during the pandemic from 2020 from the Washington Post. And they said that there was a sharp increase in people stealing food during the pandemic. I know that food banks were running out of food. I knew that soup kitchens had epic lines. I worked on a project where I interviewed a local soup kitchen in Queens, and they talked about how they were just at the breaking point because they had so many people who were so desperate for food. So people were stealing food during the pandemic. And guess what? The top items stolen during the survey. So they sent out journalists. They were talking to store owners of all these grocery chains and what are people stealing? And these were the 3 items: bread, pasta, and baby formula. Sorry, guys, but people really do steal baby formula. It's very expensive when you're poor and you're broke. And, when people need that, they need that. They can't wait. They can't wait for that. They can't wait to fill out a form and hope that a charity can get it to them, or, they're going to take it. There's also organized rings that steal baby formula. That is true. That is a known thing. But obviously, it's something that desperate people do sometimes. So go ahead and make fun of people and talk about les miserables and all of that. But stealing for food out of desperation is something that is old as money. Speaking of money, I should give a quick shout out to my sponsor, which if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you know that sponsor is listeners of this podcast and readers of my newsletter at Substack. That is right. I am 100% funded by the community, by regular, ordinary listeners, Americans, people who like the news. I have no large donor. I have no large sponsor. For the moment, I have no advertisers. So if you would like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News. You go to my Patreon and become a paid supporter. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. If you can't support the project, please share the podcast, share the newsletter with friends, tell your friends about it. That is incredibly helpful. I also want to give a shout out to someone who bought something on the Amazon wish list. It was cat food, and using just first names for privacy reasons. Thank you very much, Barbara. And that is Odin's favorite. As I said on the wish list, it's called Reveal. And it's just like pure cat food. They're very, very, very picky eaters. They drive me nuts, but I love them. So thank you so much. And moving on to the rest of the podcast. So this next clip got me very excited because when I found the one half of it back in October, I have a method of labeling my archives when I search for stuff. And this one was called Clip to Save When They Lie About Military Recruitment. Kid you not. That's what I wrote. Clip to Save. This is from PBS NewsHour. So Laura Ingraham, she actually mentioned this 3 times during her monologues last week. But these first 2 examples were the clearer example, the better example of her just saying it straight out quickly that I could pull. So this is Laura Ingraham. This is classic Laura Ingraham. She just does that thing where she'll take something and then just assume that it's about Biden, when she has no proof that anything's about Biden. And here she is talking about military recruitment.
We have a massive recruitment shortfall for a reason. I think a lot of families are very afraid to send their sons and daughters into the military with this crew in charge. Well, their 6th social justice project in the military has coincided with a jaw-dropping shortfall in military recruitment.
Now, this next clip that you're going to hear is the one that I labeled Save for When They Lie About Recruitment. This is from the PBS NewsHour. This is Nick Schifrin from October 2023.
The United States Army has not met its recruitment goals since 2014. For the fiscal year that just ended, the Army fell short of its 65,000 goal by 15,000.
Yes, that would be Nick Schifrin, ladies and gentlemen, saying 2014. So the U.S. Army, which is just one branch, but the largest branch of the U.S. military, has not met its recruitment goals since 2014. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there's the proof that even during the entire Trump administration, they were not meeting their recruitment goals. It goes all the way back to Obama. So why wouldn't they be? Now, I looked this up, and I found a nice source with the U.S. Naval Institute. The U.S. Army is the largest branch. I also found another source that showed that the U.S. Navy and Marines were also having problems with recruitment as far back as 2014. And I'm just going to read exactly verbatim what the U.S. Naval Institute wrote. Top recruiters told the House Armed Services Personnel Subcommittee that they are concerned about the future. The economy continues to improve. Fewer young people are interested in enlisting, and marketing and bonus budgets hang in the balance. Same source later on in the article Another obstacle for the military is a smaller group of qualified young people. The 17 to 24 age group is a shrinking population pool, and only 1/4 to 1/3 of them meet the necessary physical, mental, and moral standards for enlistment. So yes, they're not in shape as they used to be. There's not as many of them as there used to be, and there's other opportunities for young people. Although I will add that one thing that just happened under the Biden administration is the salaries, the starting salaries for new recruits has been increased, which I think that's about time. So definitely we need to be doing that. We, spend a lot of money on stupid weapon systems that don't work sometimes, but anyway, that's a whole other podcast. So next up, and this one had me jumping out of my skin. I was like, this network is suicidal. This network is suicidal. This network is suicidal. They just want to take all of their money, they want to put it in a pile, and they want to set it on fire. Now, you can kind of guess what I'm talking about here because it was in the headline, Dancing with Defamation. Whew! I was so, just white-knuckled watching this clip. Just say it. Just say it. Greg Gutfeld, just go over the edge. Come on. He didn't. Ugh. Right there. He's right there. Here's the clip.
I read this article in the New York Times. This is the Biden re-election strategy. Are you ready? Don't run on Bidenomics. Leave the White House more than once a week. Ask Bill and Barack to raise money for you and hope a pop star endorses you. Jessica, this is not the re-election strategy of a winning campaign. This smacks of desperation and the fact that he's clinging to Taylor Swift, who he couldn't even pick out of a lineup without Jill going like this. That's Taylor. Tells me everything you know about Joe Biden.
Is the strategy to owe $83 million for defaming a woman that you sexually assaulted?
I would love Taylor Swift's endorsement. Any politician would. But I like
you
people
ignored what
like
I just
Kid
said,
Rock.
because that was the news from the weekend on that side, and then Joe Biden was 15
Authentic
minutes late
endorsements.
to church. And you think it's the end of the world.
Late to church. He goes to church.
You want to talk? Let's
He
talk
was
about
at
that.
church in
Let's
South
talk about that
Carolina.
lawsuit then. Go ahead, Jessica. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that you shouldn't sexually assault people and then you shouldn't defame
Okay,
them.
was he found guilty of sexual
Yes, he
assault?
was.
He was a
He was
criminal?
by a jury.
Was a criminal?
It was,
It says
that was
it's
civil.
Yeah.
Oh, that means it doesn't count? Okay.
It means it's not a guilty verdict.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, it's always nice to bring something up that has nothing to
great
do with
be-
the topic.
It does. He said the campaign strategy.
Just stop interrupting everybody.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret about broadcast journalism. They have in their ear a little earpiece. So if something crazy happens or there is a correction that needs to be made immediately, a producer is going, hey, Judge Janine, no, don't. It was Thursday, not Friday. And I've seen instances on air where I saw one beautifully done with Judge Janine, where she said something wrong and she goes, wait, no, it was Saturday. So, if she gets something wrong, I've seen her do that. I've seen her, very abruptly yell a correction. And you're like, somebody just told her to say that. Also, Bad Fox Graphics caught this one. Bad Fox Graphics is an account that does similar work than I do. A little different. They find mistakes, and they that account's very funny because that account also will at the people. I never do that. I never address anybody I'm talking about directly. I never put their Twitter handle in my tweets. I'm like, why bother? They'll figure it out. But Bad Fox Graphics does it all the time. And people like Rachel Campos Duffy will actually respond, which is don't respond to us. You're just going to make us stronger. Don't ignore us. Greg Gutfeld should have learned that lesson. He still hasn't learned that lesson. He came at me last summer and I got 20,000 followers from it. I got paid subscribers. I got Patreon supporters, significantly. I got a huge boost from it. And I was like, thank you, Greg Gutfeld. Thank you, Greg Gutfeld. None of his people bothered me. I didn't get any hate mail in my email. I got nothing. They didn't really care. And he came at me for days. You just got to ignore us, you idiots. Anyway, but Bad Fox Graphics noticed a clip that I put up where Lawrence Jones said something really stupid where he said, is there wind in space? And he was with, I believe, Brian Kilmeade and Ansley Einhart, and they didn't know. They were like laughing and trying to fake it. And they're like, ha ha ha, wind in space. And there's a moment where Ansley Einhart actually touches her ear, and you hear her go, there's no wind in space. She sort of tries to cover, but I'm like, no, it's obvious somebody told you that there's no wind in space. And then apparently, like, the one of the camera people had to tell them. I was just like, this is, oh. So anyway, the reason why I go on that little tangent about the earpieces is I suspect because E. Jean Carroll has this amazing legal team. She just won $83 million and that's a whole other thing, but she just won an $83 million judgment from Trump in a defamation suit after winning a $5 million judgment in a defamation suit. If those idiots on Fox went off about how her case is not real, or she's a liar, or she's a crazy person, and they really went to town on her, and then she got flooded emails, right, of people threatening her life and screaming at her and saying all this stuff. Textbook. She goes right into court. She gets some money from Fox News. They are wounded. They are bleeding because of the Dominion lawsuit. What is wrong with these people? Like, you really can't just blatantly lie about certain people on camera. They get away with it with public figures because it's very, very difficult for a public figure to win a defamation lawsuit. And that's a whole other podcast. But the more you get talked about in the press, the harder it is to win a defamation lawsuit. So that's why Hillary Clinton, they can say whatever they want, and the chances of her winning would be very slim. But E. Jean Carroll is not, I mean, she's a public figure, but she's not as famous as Hillary Clinton. There's not a bazillion articles written about her. There's not books written about her. And if you specifically went at her for these charges, which she has already proven in court, a jury already said they agreed that Trump sexually assaulted her, boom, cha-ching. Don't be stupid. What are you so stupid? I have another example. This is a bonus example. This is Ned Ryan from the Ingraham angle. They were ripping on Nikki Haley. If you want to listen to the Nikki Haley episode, I'm getting a lot of great feedback on that. Thank you guys so much. That one took a lot of time because I did go all the way back to 2022 to see. I didn't have that many from that year. It was only a handful. But I did go back through like every single segment that was about her or where she appeared. And I just kind of did the temperature of how Fox treated her to see when they turned on her. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But this is Ned Ryan. This is from last week, the Ingraham angle. And he just brings up what he calls the Carroll case. Doesn't say E. Jean Carroll. Says the Carroll case.
Well, idiot du jour, is she not?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Nikki Haley is a useful idiot of the left. I mean, not only her rhetoric on this subject, but look at her recent comments on the bogus Carroll case, right out of the DNC playbook. And if you didn't know any better, it came right out of the mouth of Hillary Clinton, which makes sense when you think about it, Laura, as both Nikki's super PAC and the Carroll case were funded by the leftist Reid Hoffman.
So just to clarify that one a little bit, Reid Hoffman did, in fact, give Nikki Haley money for her presidential campaign, and he did give some funding for the legal expenses for E. Jean Carroll. That was done through like a foundation, and it was done on a grant. And E. Jean Carroll had no idea who put the money in the grant. It was Hoffman. Now, Hoffman gave Nikki Haley $250,000, which to you or I would be a lot of money. To a presidential campaign, it's not that much money as far as donors are concerned, because she has gotten, I don't know the exact amount because it's kind of a moving number, but it was like tens of millions from conservative groups. So she's gotten a lot of money from the Koch Foundation indirectly. They have a number of different nonprofits, and the way they can give that much money is they're giving it to super PACs. They can't legally give it to her campaign directly, but they're giving it to super PACs associated with Nikki Haley, and that's like kind of going to her campaign. It's hard to describe that. Campaign finance. So, yeah, $250,000 in that context is not a lot of money. And he has also said he's done, he's on pause with her at the moment because she lost in Iowa and New Hampshire. So there's hyperlinks to all of this in the newsletter. So I just some background on the E. Jean Carroll defamation case if you don't know it. Carroll accused Trump in 2019 of sexually assaulting her in a department store dressing room decades earlier. He publicly denied that he'd ever met her and called her a whack job. She had to deal with just tremendous harassment because of this. She sued him in civil court for defamation. The first jury found that Trump had sexually assaulted her and ended up awarding her $5 million in damages. Immediately following the first verdict, Trump continued to make defamatory statements about Carroll at campaign events and on social media. So she sued him again. And on Friday, January 26th, a jury awarded E. Jean Carroll $83 million in a second defamation case against Donald J. Trump. And part of the reason why they gave her so much money is to shut him up. I don't think it's going to work. But I did a tiny bit of Judge Janine. I feel like I should do a little bit more. If you're new to the podcast, this is the 99th episode. And I've got to say, next week's going to be 100. And it's also going to be the 2-year anniversary of Decoding Fox News. The newsroom of one, a crazy woman who lives with 2 cats in a tiny apartment with a microphone, a laptop, and a dream. If we were doing a biography for her on Fox and Friends, I'd probably narrate it. The joke is, if they did do like a Who is Juliet Jeske on Fox Nation, it would be a weird one. I don't want to waste too much time on this. My ex-husband is a circus clown. He is openly gay now. He was gay the whole marriage. I'm very open about this. I've written about it. It's no secret. And I used to work on cruise ships. I walked on stilts. I was in the Macy's Day Parade twice, performed all over the place, done all kinds of wacky jobs. I've had a weird life. I play the accordion. I play the ukulele. I'm a total weirdo. So I would make a very interesting, I think, just because people would be like, are you serious? And then how could I forget that I was like a secret, anonymous researcher of the Proud Boys who was sending stuff to journalists covertly and it ended up with people thinking I was part of a bomb plot when it was really a crazy person from Florida sending pipe bombs all over the place. And I happened to send material about the Proud Boys on the same day, and they got confused. And so I had cops in my tiny apartment, like interrogating me. And I was just like, I'm a crazy cat lady. It's all good. And then the New York Daily News ambushed me and tried to do a story about me. And I begged them and had a total mental breakdown and started crying and said, please don't. I don't want to get killed by the Proud Boys. And that was before anybody knew who the Proud Boys were. And then I went to grad school and wouldn't shut up about the crazy story. And yeah, it's been weird. Grad school in my 40s. Very strange life. Very, very, very weird life. Very weird life. Can't make it up. Didn't plan for any of this. Just thought I'd be I don't know. I just thought I didn't want to live in Missouri. That was my goal, to get out of Missouri. Sorry, guys who live in Missouri. Love you. It wasn't for me. Didn't match. Didn't fit. But anyway, moving on. I know I have a lot of Missouri listeners, so I don't want to offend anybody. But, we all have to find our place. And for me, it was New York City. I love Chicago, too. But anyway, stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I take the hours I've watched and analyzed on Fox News and compare them to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. We're going to start with updates in the war in Ukraine. Leaders of 27 European countries agreed to a deal to provide Ukraine with 50 billion euros or $54 billion. Hungary, a strong ally to Russia, had threatened to veto the measure. The package includes loans and grants that are meant to rebuild the country and set it up for future EU membership. The EU has a separate plan for supplying military support. PBS included an extended interview with Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO. Stoltenberg stressed that the Ukrainian military was in great need of weapons and military support. He also emphasized that European countries and Canada had sent more to support the beleaguered nation than the United States. That is true. I looked it up. Don't listen to Trump. He's lying. The United Nations International Court rejected large parts of a case filed by Ukraine alleging that Russia bankrolled separatist rebels in the country's east a decade ago and has discriminated against Crimea's multi-ethnic community since its annexation of the peninsula. Again, that was rejected by the UN. PBS also included an interview with Sergei Mendeveev, a local Russian politician who had fled to Georgia due to his opposition to the war with Ukraine. Over 20,000 Russians have been detained for protesting the war. Ukraine said that Russia is refusing to turn over the bodies of 65 prisoners of war who Moscow claimed were killed in the downing of a Russian military transport plane by Ukrainian forces. Ukraine has denied the allegation and called it rampant Russian propaganda. Russia and Ukraine exchanged hundreds of prisoners of war last week. Russia received 195 soldiers, and 207 people, including soldiers and other prisoners, were returned to Ukraine. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. Israel said it killed 2,000 Hamas gunmen in Khan Yunis. Some Hamas members surrendered to IDF troops, giving the Israelis valuable intelligence. That's according to the Israelis. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, 27,000 people have been killed in Gaza since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. The ministry does not differentiate between civilian and combatant deaths. Israeli special forces, disguised as women and healthcare workers, assassinated 3 militants in a hospital in the West Bank. There was no return fire as this was a targeted strike. President Biden issued an executive order that targeted Israeli settlers who've been accused of attacking Palestinians and peace activists in the West Bank. The EO is meant to prevent the settlers from entering the United States, using American financial systems, or working with U.S. companies. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with 26 representatives from 8 hostage families. The families pressed for him to define the return of the hostages as the primary aim of the war. Netanyahu refused to do so, but he did say, "Our commitment is to bring everyone back." PBS produced an extensive interview with Mahid bin Mohammed al-Ansari, a Qatari foreign ministry spokesperson. He spoke at length about Qatar's role in a ceasefire negotiation between Israel and Hamas. Although there is no definite deal at the moment, some progress has been made. Khan Yunis, the second largest city in Gaza, experienced tremendous damage. According to reporting by BBC, at least half the buildings in the Gaza Strip have been damaged or destroyed. According to the United Nations, about 1.7 million people, or 80% of the population, has been displaced, with nearly half crammed into the southern portion of the Strip. The CEO of Alaska Airlines said that the company found loose bolts on many of its Boeing 737 MAX 9s. This was the first interview since a door plug on one of its MAX 9 airplanes shot out of the side of the fuselage only a few minutes into the flight, forcing the pilot to make an emergency landing. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled that the state's constitution guaranteed a fundamental right to reproductive autonomy, which included the decision on whether to have an abortion. The Supreme Court of the United States should rule on a case that involves access to a drug used in medication abortions in March. A Hong Kong court ruled that Evergrande Group, a large real estate developer in China, must liquidate its assets after the company was unable to obtain $300 billion from investors. The company's demise is a sign of China's slowing economy. The Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled last week that Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva was disqualified for the 2022 Winter Olympics for using a banned heart medication during the competition. She will be stripped of her gold medal, and the United States' second-place winner is set to be named the Olympic champion. PBS produced a full-length segment on the state of the electric vehicle market in the United States. Demands for the cars is growing, but it's slower than automakers and the Biden administration had hoped for. The consumer price confidence is up for a third month in a row. It's at the highest level since December 2021. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan was found guilty of corruption and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Khan and his wife were accused of retaining and selling state gifts in violation of government rules. Khan was also disqualified for holding public office for 10 years. The French government announced new controls on cheap foreign imports after a series of farmer protests in the country. Musician Elton John and his longtime lyricist Bernie Taupin received the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song. They will both be honored in a tribute concert in April. A federal study by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry found high rates of 8 cancers linked to contaminated water at a U.S. Navy and Marine base, Camp Lejeune. Tens of thousands of troops and civilians drank contaminated water at the base from 1975 to 1985. PBS produced a segment about an investigation by the Washington Post into the payouts the NFL has paid players for brain trauma, or CTE, they received while playing in the league. The NFL has awarded $1.2 billion to more than 1,600 athletes, but the Post found that only 15% of the claims were approved. The investigation also found that doctors discovered CTE cases during autopsies in some players who the NFL said did not qualify for a settlement. As reported last week, an extreme drought in Panama has caused reduced shipping in the Panama Canal. PBS produced a longer segment about the problem that went into more depth about possible causes and solutions. The number of Americans getting health insurance through the Affordable Care Act has hit a record high, with more than 21 million people signed up through the marketplaces. The segment explored how the ACA is once again a campaign issue, as Trump and Republicans have vowed to dismantle the program. A fire started by liquid natural gas canisters in Kenya killed 3 and injured at least 280. The explosion happened at an illegal gas depot in a residential area near the capital. North Korea fired cruise missiles off its western coast. The launch on Friday marked the 4th time in just over a week that North Korea has launched such missiles. Tesla issued a recall for nearly every car it sold in the United States because some warning lights on instrument panels are too small. PBS produced a segment about various conspiracy theories circling in right-wing media over Taylor Swift and the Super Bowl. PBS even showcased a brief clip from Jesse Watters' Primetime in its segment. Watters has promoted the idea that Swift was a PSYOP, psychological operation, working for the Department of Defense. Chita Rivera, a Broadway actress, singer, and dancer, died at the age of 91. She was best known as an original cast member in the Broadway production of West Side Story. She also appeared in Bye Bye Birdie, Chicago, and the title role of Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Newsweek called her only the greatest musical theater dancer ever. N. Scott Momaday was a Pulitzer-winning Native American novelist who also wrote poetry, memoirs, and essays. He was best known for his novel, House Made of Dawn. He died on Wednesday at his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He was 89. Carl Weathers, actor and former professional football player, died at the age of 76. Weathers played opposite Sylvester Stallone in the triple Oscar-winning film Rocky. He also appeared in Predator, Happy Gilmore, and was the voice of Combat Carl in the Toy Story films. He also appeared in a self-deprecating fictional version of himself in the American television series Arrested Development. Joe Madison, radio host and civil rights activist, died at the age of 74. Madison was ranked the number 6 most important talk show host in the country in 2023 by Talkers Magazine. He once interviewed Barack Obama in the Oval Office. President Biden called him the voice of a generation. That was a lot. None of that was on Fox. They just ignored all of it. So now, by the numbers, we're way over time. We start with Fox News. We go to the top 5 topics for the week. Top 5 would include, number 1, 21%, U.S. military strikes in the Middle East. Number 2, border crisis at 17%. Then we've got U.S. soldiers killed in Jordan, 11%. Trump, 2024, and that's 100% promoting him, 4%. And Biden bashing, also 4%. For the PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics. Artist profile, it's a regular. U.S. military soldiers killed in Jordan, 8%. Ukraine war, 7%. Author profile, 6%. And the Israel-Hamas war, 5%. Now, words used on Fox News for the week ending February 4th, 2024. Iran, 470. Biden, 405. Border, 279. Trump, 254. Migrant, 226. Crime, 87. Israel, 75. China, 34. Haley, 24. Immigration, 24. Economy, 23. Obama, weirdly, came up a lot, 16. Hunter, 2. That's shocking. I don't think it's been 2 in months. Inflation, 2. AOC, 1. And Dean Phillips magically dropped back down to 0. What? Okay. I went a little bit longer than I like to, but thank you so much for listening. You can catch Decoding Fox News on Twitter, also known as X, Threads, which I'm loving, Instagram, the comments are always hilarious, TikTok, on Facebook and YouTube, I'm under Juliet Jeske, Juliet spelled like Romeo and Jeske spelled like Jeske. I think I got all my platforms. Again, if you would like to become a paid subscriber, that's the only way I exist, is from the generosity of my paid subscribers. You can go to my Substack channel for Decoding Fox News. You can also become a paid supporter at Patreon. I have a lot of paid supporters at Patreon. Thank you so much. You can go there, and paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. They just got the written version of the Nikki Haley podcast, the full version of it. I try to do something at least once a week now. I'm getting better at it. It's hard because this job kicks my butt every single week. The podcast mascots, Odin and Thor, also send their love. I will see you at the next podcast, which will be, hopefully, probably, unless there's a bonus one, number 100 for the 2-year anniversary. Thank you so much.
Resolute Square.